friends, strangers, people on the internet. I'm Miss McKay, and these are my tips for talking about TV. You just watched a show, perhaps an amazing new queer teen romance on Netflix, and you're trying to talk to your friend about what you just saw. You want to talk about the kiss between Darcy and Tara and how it filled a hole that you thought was missing from your high school life. Meanwhile, your friend is talking about how they want to see a mainstream queer romance that's not focused on two cis white men. You're frustrated that they're dismissing the parts of the show you love, and they're frustrated that you're not engaging with their critique. This conversation isn't working. Let's see if we can fix it. When we're talking about media like Heartstopper, we need to consider what perspective our point or opinion is coming from. There's a lot of feeling involved in watching something, and that's on purpose. Media is made so that we feel things. But our feelings aren't going to be the same as everyone else's, and maybe we're not even talking about the same kind of feelings? So to get us on the same page, we're going to say there are four main perspectives to use when we're talking about media: personal, audience, societal, and industry. Using those four perspectives, we're going to narrow down on what we're actually trying to address in the piece so that we can have better conversations about the media we love. The first perspective, and arguably one of the most important, is our personal perspective on a piece. Did you cry at a scene? Was it enjoyable to watch? Maybe it made you think of a relationship you have in your real life or something that's happened to you in the past. Your experiences and your interpretation of a piece of media is an important part to any discussion. Beyond our personal experience is that of the wider audience. My reaction could be completely different to your reaction, which could be completely different to all of our friends, or critics, or Oprah, or anyone else. When you're talking about an audience response, it's important to identify what segment of the audience you're looking at. So for example, with Heartstopper, the response of queer audience members might be very different from non-queer audience members who might not relate in the same way. Emotional response isn't the only important factor though when talking about a piece of media. We all have that one movie that makes us cry for no reason. That's why we also need to talk about media as a part of society and as part of industry. Talking about media as a part of society looks at the impact a piece of media has on the social and political world. This could include things like representation, response to a global crisis, or just why a piece of media is relevant right now. Instead of looking at the emotional response, it's looking at the tangible impact that the media has on the world. This is similar but different to looking at it as a part of the industry. Looking at a piece of media as a part of the creative industries looks at who created it, how they created it, and what impact that has on other people who are working to make creative projects. It especially looks at whether or not the production choices that were made are appropriate to the story being told and what impact they've had on the people who worked on the production. Personal, audience, society, and industry. Now, let's see if we can apply these using Heartstopper as an example. Personally, I loved the casting of Heartstopper. When I first saw the show, I hadn't yet read the comics, so I didn't have an attachment to any specific idea of the characters. So the casting to me was just about the experience that I had with the show. I was reminded a lot of the friends that I had in high school and the relationships they had with each other. And watching Kit Connor's portrayal of Nick reminded me a lot of my own experience with queerness. From what I've seen in reviews and TikToks, a lot of the wider audience experience is very similar to my own. Even those who read the comic before seem to be agreeing with the choices casting made, and all of the actors are getting a lot of praise for their performance. Within society, I think it's really wonderful to see young people playing young people on screen. Especially with young queer romances, media often focus on the traumatic experiences or the negatives of coming out and falling in love as a young queer person. The choice to cast young people kept the show light in a way that I just don't think would have happened if it was 30-year-olds playing the same role on the screen. Seeing that joyful story has an impact on how society views the queer experience and on how young people will feel about being queer themselves. However, the same point that I think is a positive within society is something that I think is a lot more difficult when it comes to discussing the production as a part of the industry. The young people who are cast in Heartstopper are all just above 18, which you can't deny was partially done because of the legal restrictions for work hours for people below 18. It's possible to do shows that are actually casting people who are 16 years old, who are age appropriate to the characters they're playing. it's just more expensive. So recognizing the role that monetary influence had on the casting, I think is worthwhile when considering the fame that these 18-year-olds now have and the difficulty that they're going to have experiencing that level of stardom at 18. We're already seeing upsetting treatment of the actors on social media platforms like Twitter and TikTok, especially with Kit Connor, with both an overt sexualization and obsession over his character and his portrayal. Ultimately, though, I don't know if this point is really something that's about Heartstopper, more as a wider critique about industry and young people who are interacting with the film and TV industry. You see this with other people turning 18 while sitting in stardom, like Tommy Innit and Olivia Rodrigo. There are suddenly a lot more fan edits that take a very different tone, as well as a different tone in news and media that's talking about them. The way creative industries treat people when they turn 18 reveals a lot about the issues with infantilization of young people in these industries, as well as issues with overt sexualization of people who are just barely 18. All of this is to say that I think the treatment of the young actors in Heartstopper is a worthwhile part of the discussion around Heartstopper as a piece of media. However, I don't think it's particular to Heartstopper. What is particular to Heartstopper is the way that they cast people with real, lived experiences in roles that were relevant to them. For these actors, it provided them an opportunity to start a career that they might never have gotten the same chance for, and it also set a precedent for future YA productions and how they should cast young queer people. Using these 4 perspectives, I was able to break down my complicated feelings about Heartstopper in a way that both acknowledged my unquestioning joy with the series, while also taking a look at some of the critiques that I could have about its role in industry. If we were going back to that conversation with my friend who wants to talk about the centering of queer narratives on cis white men, I can see that they're looking at the show in a perspective of society. So maybe I can meet them there and have a conversation about the casting of young people and maybe bring it into industry, and we can have the critical conversation they're looking for. Or I can acknowledge the validity of the point that they're making, but then also ask them about their personal response to the show, so we can talk about the feelings we had about the story and our personal experiences. Either way, I can identify the perspective they're bringing and find a way to make us match up so we can have a conversation that we actually want to have about the show. And ultimately, finish the conversation so we can get to another rewatch. Thanks for watching.